The Awakening Conscience by William Holman Hunt, another pre-Raphaelite, stages Ruskin's ideas about the breakdown of humanity in a modern setting. She is the soul of society, corrupted. She's a kept woman. This is the flat she lives in, paid for by her wealthy lover. Nature is out the window, reflected in the mirror at the back of the room. We see what her eyes are now seeing. The sight of nature is her awakening realization that she's a slave, her spirit deadened like any worker in the industrial age. How is the room decorated? The pompous, heavy Victorian interior, reeking of claustrophobia. How about some interior decoration that saves the soul? The artist-craftsman William Morris, inspired by Ruskin, expressed nature's richness in wallpaper. Nature compressed into patterns that demand your attention and are almost overlookable because they seem so natural. Ruskin says that man's natural soulfulness is expressed in medieval decoration. Morris, who's read everything that Ruskin's written and believes what he says, thinks it would be unsoulful to just copy a bit of medievalism. Medieval decoration is full of nature. Go to nature, get visual patterns from that. Morris's designs are based on his own observation of leaves, flowers, stems. They're inventions based on looking at nature. What's striking about them is how demanding they are and yet how easily they work. They're just wallpaper, they're just background. But being such a highly original mixture of visual harmony and complexity, they make the whole idea of the background of daily existence seem suddenly exciting. You could have your mind on the wall. When Morris does wallpaper or woven tapestries that are like wallpaper, both based on staring intently at what's in the garden, birds, flowers, leaves, he's not just thinking, what do you need in the background of a dining room for a dinner party? He's thinking, how do you remake your soul? How do you have an environment around you that's suffused with moral high values and isn't just schmaltzy decoration that anaesthetizes you and makes you not care about the moral corruption that society now accepts and that surrounds you everywhere? How about sitting in a chair and feeling something moral is happening? Ruskin said how a thing is made and the spirit that goes into it affects whether it stands for health or decay. In response, Morris set up workshops where labourers worked in humane conditions with space and light. They did use machines, but now these served individual creativity. They didn't crush it. The result, a new type of furniture. Everything about it forces you to think about nature. Contrast that with the typical Victorian furniture look, heavy and polished. It shows you've got security, money, you're part of an empire, you ooze confidence. A Morris chair is different to all that. It'd be likely to be made in beechwood, say, a traditional English material that immediately suggests the English countryside. A typical Victorian chair would be made out of imported, exotic, imperial stuff, using machines that can do all the joining and fitting super smoothly. It would have upholstery, matting, horsehair, springs, padding, overstuffing. A Morris chair, instead, is done with rush, a reed that grows on the riverbank. With Morris's stuff, there's a direct connection between the maker and the object. It's all about the simplest, most direct thing. It looks different, maybe uncomfortable at first. It feels strange. You sit in it, you're thinking differently. You're against your own time. You're sitting differently. You're in the world differently. Your world has changed. Today, souls, edifying nature, God and salvation are not urgent terms. But try thinking of this litany not as old ghosts long ago banished, but metaphors for current problems. We are still living the fallout from social changes that Ruskin was attempting to describe when they were brand new. In fact, Ruskin's ideas have become part of our lives. resisted the soul-destroying effects of industrialism with cranky concepts like free schools, free libraries, town planning, smokeless zones, green belts, all of which we now take for granted. The moral laws he drew out of his observation of the way the separate parts of any natural organism cooperate and cohere, the processes he saw in all this harmless greenery when he was out on his walks, these fired up Gandhi, Chairman Mao, and the early British Labour Party. While Ruskin was prophesying the future, something was decongesting in his head. The great scheme of things he had absorbed from his Bible lessons as a child no longer added up. Charles Darwin's Origin of Species came out in 1859. It said man is a product of natural selection, not of God. Ruskin is not the opposite to Darwin, an art man versus a science man. All of Ruskin's love of nature is informed by his studies in mineralogy and biology. He knows all the ologies. And in the mid-19th century, they all said the same thing. Bible equals metaphor. But what we live in is reality. Ruskin wrote, "Those geologists' hammers. I hear the clink of them at the end of every cadence of the Bible verses." Darwin's arguments contributed to a dramatic alteration in Ruskin's worldview. But what clinched it was the sight of this painting, The Queen of Sheba, by the Venetian artist Veronese. Ruskin stood in front of it in a gallery in Turin. He soaked up the delicious play of shapes and colours. He thought, why must art and nature be tied to God, who's always so uptight about pleasure? Ruskin was 39. He said it became absolutely clear to him that God couldn't have given man all this fantastic sensuality, only to then say it was a sin for him to have it. The effect on Ruskin, he said, was that he could no longer believe in a vengeful God who sought out sinners to punish them. He didn't go completely atheist, but he did lose faith in the idea that the visible world is some kind of language of the truth of God. Ruskin doesn't say, oh, well, that's it then. He says, how about having God back, but a different kind of God? We'll call it the truth of art. And that is the point of revelation for us. That's where Ruskin starts to speak to us. We don't know how to be serious. Art can show us that. We don't know how to see it. Ruskin is the prophet of that. The balance of seriousness and playfulness that art performs is capable of speaking to somewhere deep inside ourselves. We might call that dimension spiritual or soulful, whatever. For the first half of his life, Ruskin called it religious. The point where he stops doing that is the point where Ruskin becomes modern. It's the moment when he becomes one of us. Ruskin is talking to us through art. But in 1878, when Ruskin was 59, he found himself in a fight with art, the most famous art trial in history. Silence in court while the capitalist ads are on.